Section 52 of All About Coffee. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. All About Coffee by William Ukers. A History of Coffee in Literature, Part 1. The Romance of Coffee and its influence on the discourse, poetry, history, drama, philosophic writing, and fiction of the 17th and 18th centuries and on the writers of today, coffee quips and anecdotes. Any study of the literature of coffee comprehends a survey of selections from the best thought of civilized nations, from the time of Rhazes, 850 to 922, to Francis Saltus. We have seen in Chapter 3 how Rhazes, the physician-philosopher, appears to have been the first writer to mention coffee, and was followed by other great physicians, like Ben Ghiasla, a contemporary, and Avicenna, 980 to 1037. Then arose many legends about coffee that served as an inspiration for Arabian, French, Italian, and English poets. Sheikh Gemaluddin, Mufti of Mocha, is said to have discovered the virtues of coffee about 1454 and to have promoted the use of the drink in Arabia. Knowledge of the new beverage was given to Europeans by the botanists Raoulf and Alpini towards the close of the 16th century. The first authentic account of the origin of coffee was written by Abd al-Qadir in 1587. It is the famous Arabian manuscript commending the use of coffee, preserved in the Bibliothèque Nationale, Paris, and catalogued as Arab 4590. Its title, written in Arabic, is as follows, which is pronounced, reading right to left, Omdat az-Sawfa Fihal al-Qawwa, or, in the literary style, Omdatu sa Sawafti Fihalu il-Kawati, which means, literally, the maintenance of purity as regards the legitimacy of coffee, or more freely, argument in favor of the legitimate use of coffee. Kawa is the Arabic word for coffee. The author is Abd al-Qadir ibn Muhammad al-Ansari al-Jazari al-Hanbali. That is, he was named Abd al-Qadir, son of Muhammad. Abd al-Qadir means slave of the strong one, i.e. of God, while al-Ansari means that he was a descendant of the Ansari, i.e. helpers. The people of Medina who received and protected the Prophet Muhammad after his flight from Mecca, al-Jazari, means that he was a man of Mesopotamia, and al-Hanbali, that in law and theology he belonged to the well-known sect or school of the Hanbalites, so called after the great jurist and writer Ahmed ibn Hanbal, who died at Baghdad after Hijra 241 AD 855. The Hanbalites are one of the four great sects of the Sunni Muhammadans. Abd al-Qadir ibn Muhammad lived in the 10th century of the Hijra, the 16th of our era, and wrote his book in 996 after Hijra, or 1587 AD. Coffee had then been in common use since about 1450 AD in Arabia. It was not in use in the time of the Prophet, who died in 632 AD, but he had forbidden the drink of strong liquors which affect the brain, and hence it was argued that coffee as a stimulant was unlawful. Even today, the community of the Wahhabis, very powerful in Arabia 100 years ago, and still dominant in part of it, do not permit the use of coffee. Abd al-Qadir's book is thought to have been based on an earlier writing by Shihab ad-Din Ahmed ibn Abd al-Ghaffar al-Maliki, as he refers to the latter on the third page of his manuscript. But if so, this previous work does not appear to have been preserved. Larocque says Shihab ad-Din was an Arabian historian who supplied the main part of Abd al-Qadir's story. Larocque refers also to a Turkish historian. Research by the author has failed to disclose anything about Shihab ad-Din, save his name. Al-Maliki means that he belonged to the Malakites, another of the four great Sunni sects, and that he wrote about 100 years before Abd al-Qadir. No copy of his writings is known to exist. The illustrations show the title page of Abd al-Qadir's manuscript, the first page, the third page, and the flyleaf of the cover, the latter containing an inscription in Latin made at the time the manuscript was first received or classified. It reads in Latin, and the translation of the Latin is, concerning the legitimate and lawful use of the drink, commonly known as café, by Abd al-Qadir bin Muhammad al-Ansari, The book is composed in 7 chapters and was brought out by the author in the year of the Hegira, 996, at which time 120 years had passed since the use of this drink had become firmly established in Arabia Felix. Coffee in Poetry. The Abd al-Qadir work immortalized coffee. It is in 7 chapters. The first treats of the etymology and significance of the word kawa, the nature and properties of the bean where the drink was first used, and describes its virtues. The other chapters have to do largely with the church dispute in Mecca in 1511, answer the religious objectors to coffee, and conclude with a collection of Arabic verses composed during the Mecca controversy by the best poets of the time. The Neuntel, ambassador from the court of Louis XIV to the Ottoman Porte, brought back with him to Paris from Constantinople the Abd al-Qadir manuscript and another by Bichivelli, one of the 3 general treasures of the Ottoman Empire. The latter work is of later date than the Abd al-Qadir manuscript and is concerned chiefly with the history of the introduction of coffee into Egypt, Syria, Damascus, Aleppo, and Constantinople. The following are 2 of the earliest Arabic poems in praise of coffee. They are about the period of the first coffee persecution in Mecca, 1511, and are typical of the best thought of the day. In Praise of Coffee. Translation from the Arabic. O coffee, thou dost dispel all cares, thou art the object of desire to the scholar, this is the beverage of the friends of God. It gives health to those in its service who strive after wisdom. Prepared from the simple shell of the berry, it has the odor of musk and the color of ink. The intelligent man who empties these cups of foaming coffee, he alone knows truth. May God deprive of this drink the foolish man who condemns it with incurable obstinacy. Coffee is our gold. Wherever it is served, one enjoys the society of the noblest and most generous men. O drink, as harmless as pure milk, which differs from it only in its blackness. Here is another rhymed version of the same poem. In Praise of Coffee. Translation from the Arabic. O coffee, doved and fragrant drink, thou drivest care away, the object though of that man's wish who studies night and day. Thou suitest him, thou givest him health, and God doth favor those who walk straight on his wisdom's way, nor seek their own repose. Fragrant as musk thy berry is, yet black as ink in sooth, and he who sips thy fragrant cup can only know the truth. Insensate they who, tasting not, yet vilify its use, for when they thirst and seek its help, God will the gift refuse. O coffee is our health, for see, where'er on earth it grows, men live whose aims are noble, true virtues who disclose. Coffee Companionship. Translation from the Arabic. Come and enjoy the company of coffee in the places of its habitation, for the divine goodness envelopes those who partake of its feast. There the elegance of the rugs, the sweetness of life, the society of the guests, all give a picture of the abode of the blessed. It is a wine which no sorrow could resist when the cupbearer presents thee with the cup which contains it. It is not long since Aden saw thy birth. If thou doubtest this, see the freshness of youth shining on the faces of thy children. Grief is not found within its habitations. Trouble yields humbly to its power. It is the beverage of the children of God. It is the source of health. It is the stream in which we wash away our sorrows. It is the fire which consumes our griefs. Whoever has once known the chafing dish which prepares this beverage will feel only aversion for wine and liquor from casks. Delicious beverage, its color is the seal of its purity. Reason pronounces favorably on the lawfulness of it. Drink of it confidently, and give not ear to the speech of the foolish, who condemn it without reason. During the period of the second religious persecution of coffee in the latter part of the 16th century, other Arabian poets sang the praises of coffee. The learned Fakhr Eddin Abu Bakr ben Abid Aisi wrote a book entitled The Triumph of Coffee, and the poet Sheikh Sherif Eddin Omar bin Farid sang of it in harmonious verse, wherein, discoursing of his mistress, he could find no more flattering comparison than coffee. He exclaims, She has made me drink, in long draughts, the fever, or rather the coffee of love. The numerous contributions by early travelers to the literature of coffee have been mentioned in chronological order in the history chapters. After Raoulf and Alpini, there were Sir Anthony Shirley, Parry, Biddulph, Captain John Smith, Sir George Sandys, Sir Thomas Herbert, and Sir Henry Blount in England, Tavernier, Thévenot, Bernier, P. de la Roque, and Galland in France, de Liaval in Italy, Olerius and Niebuhr in Germany, Nijhoff in Holland, and others. Francis Bacon wrote about coffee in his Hist, Vitae Morti and Silva Silvarum, 1623 to 1627. Burton referred to it in his Anatomy of Melancholy in 1632. Parkinson described it in his Theatrum Botanicum in 1640. In 1652, Pasquale Ozzie published his famous handbill in London, a literary effort as well as a splendid first advertisement. Faustus Nyren, Banasius, produced in Rome in 1671, the first Briton treatise devoted solely to coffee. The same year, Dufour brought out the first treatise in French. This he followed in 1684 with his work, The Manner of Making Coffee, Tea, and Chocolate. John Ray extolled the virtues of coffee in his Universal Botany of Plants, published in London in 1686. Galland translated the Abd el-Kabir manuscript into French in 1699, and Jean Larocque published his Voyage de l'Arabe Heureuse in Paris in 1715. Excerpts from nearly all these works appear in various chapters of this work. Leonardo Ferdinandus Meissner published a Latin treatise on coffee, tea, and chocolate in 1721. Dr. James Douglas published in London, 1727, his Arbor Yemenensis Fractum Coffee Fernes, or Description and History of the Coffee Tree. This work laid under contribution many of the Italian, German, French, and English scholars mentioned above, and the author mentioned as other sources of information Dr. Quincy, Pecci, Gaudron, De Fontenelle, Professor Boerhaave, Figuerea, Chaberou, Sir Hans Sloane, Langius, and Dumont. In the 17th and 18th centuries, the poets and the dramatists of France, Italy, and England found a plentiful supply in what had already been written on coffee, to say nothing of the inspiration offered by the drink itself and by the society of the cafés of the period. French poets, familiar with Latin, first took coffee as the subject of their verse. Vanier sang its praises in the 8th book of his Praedium Rusticum, and Phelan, a Jesuit professor of Trinity College, Lyon, wrote a didactic poem called Faba Arabica Carmen, which is included in the Poemata Didascalia of D'Olvi. Abbe Guillaume Massieu, Carmen Caféum, composed in 1718, has been referred to in Chapter 3. It was read at the Academy of Inscriptions. One of the panegyrists of this author, de Bose, in his Éloge de Massy, says that if Horace and Virgil had known of coffee, the poem might easily have been attributed to them. And Thierry, who translated it into French, says, "It is a pearl of elegance in a rare jewel case." The following translation of the poem from the Latin original was made for this work. Coffee, a poem by Guillaume Massieu of the French Academy. A literal prose translation from the original Latin in the British Museum. How coffee first came to our shores, what the nature of the divine drink is, what's its use, how it brings ready aid to man against every kind of evils, I shall here begin to tell in simple verse. You soft-spoken men, who have often tried the sweetness of this drink, if it has never deceived your wish or mocked your hopes, with its empty results, be propitious and lend a willing ear to our song. And may you, O Phoebus, kindly be present to acknowledge, as your gift, the power of herbs and healthful plants, and to dispel sad diseases from our bodies, for they say you are the author of this blessing, and may you spread your gifts among peoples, and everywhere far and wide throughout the entire world. Across Libya far and the 7 mouths of the swollen Nile, where Asia most joyfully spreads in immense fields, Rich in various resources and filled with fragrant woods, a region extends. The Sabines of old inhabited it. I believe indeed nature, the best parent of all things, loved this place more than all others with a tender love. Here the air of heaven always breathes more mildly. The sun has a gentler power. Here are flowers of a different clime. And the earth with fertile bosom brings forth various fruits, cinnamon, cassia, myrrh, and fragrant thyme. Amid the resources and gifts of this blessed land, turn to the sun and the warm south winds. A tree spontaneously lifts itself into the upper air, growing nowhere else and unknown in earlier centuries. By no means great in size, it stretches not far its spreading branches, nor lifts a lofty top to heaven, but slowly, after the manner of myrtle or pliant broom, it rises from the ground. Many a nut bends its rich branches, small like a bean, dark and dull in color, marked by a slight groove in the center of its hull. To transplant this growth to our own fields, many have tried, and to cultivate it with great care. In vain, for the plant has not responded to the zeal and desires of the planters, and has rendered vain their long labor. Before day, the root of the tender herb has withered away. Either this has happened through fault of climate, or grudging, earth refuses to furnish fit nourishment to the foreign plant. Therefore come thee, whoever shall be possessed by a love for coffee, do not regret having brought the healthful bean from the far, remote world of Arabia, for this is its bountiful mother country. The soothing draught first flowed from those regions through other peoples, thence through all Europe and Asia, and next made its way through the entire world. Therefore, what you shall know to be sufficient for your needs, do you prepare long beforehand. Let it be your care to have collected yearly a copious store, and providently fill small granaries, as of yore the farmer, early mindful and provident of the future, collected crops from his fields, and garnered them in his barns, and turned his attention to the coming year. None the less, meanwhile, must the utensils for coffee be cared for. Let not vessels suited for drinking the beverage be lacking, and a pot, whose narrow neck should be topped by a small cover, and whose body should swell gradually into an oblong shape. When these things shall have been provided by you, let your next care be to roast well the beans with flames, and to grind them when roasted. Nor should the hammer cease to crush them with many a blow, until they lay aside their hardness, and when thoroughly ground, become fine powder, which forthwith pack either in a bag or a box made for such uses, and wrap it in leather and smear it over with soft wax, lest narrow chinks be open or hidden channels. Unless you prevent these, by a secret path gradually small particles and whatever of value exists, and the entire strength would leave, wasting into empty air. Coffee scenes in the Near and the Far East. There is also a hollow machine like a small tower, which they call a mill, in which you can bruise the useful fruit of the roasted bean and crush it with frequent rubbing. A revolving pivot in the middle, on an easy wheel turning, twists its metal joints on a cracking stem. The top of the wheel, you know, is pierced with an ivory handle, which will have to be turned by hand through 1,000 revolutions, and through 1,000 circles it moves the pivot. When you put a kernel in, you will turn the handle with quick hand, no delay, and you will wonder how the crackling kernel is, with much grinding quickly reduced to a powder. Once only the lower compartment receives on its kindly bosom the crushed grains, which are placed in the very depths of the box. But why do we linger over these less important matters? Greater things call us. Then is it time to drain the sweet draught, either under the new light of the early sun in the morning, when an empty stomach demands food, or when after the splendid feast of a magnificent table, the overburdened stomach suffers from too heavy load, and unequal to the demands made upon it seeks the aid of external heat. Then come, when now the pot grows ruddy in the fire, crackling beneath, and you shall behold the liquid, swelling with mingled powdered coffee, now bubble around the brim, draw it from the fire. Unless you should do this, the force of the water would break forth suddenly, overflowing, and would sprinkle the beverage on the fire beneath. Therefore, let no such accident disturb your joys. You should keep watch carefully when the water no longer restrains itself and bubbles with the heat. Then return the pot to the fire thrice and 4 times, until the powdered coffee steams in the midst of the fire and blends thoroughly with the surrounding water. This soothing drink ought to be boiled with skill, to be drunk with art, not in the way men are wont to drink other beverages, and with reason. For when you shall have taken it stemming from a quick fire, and gradually all the dregs have settled to the very bottom, you shall not drink it impatiently at one gulp, but rather sip it little by little, and between draughts contrive pleasant delays. And sipping, drain it in long draughts, so long as it is still hot and burns the palate. For then it is better, then it permeates our inmost bones, and penetrating within to the center of our vitals and our marrow, it pervades all our body with its vivifying strength. Often, even merely inhaling the odor with their nostrils, men have welcomed it, when it has bubbled up from the bottom, more refreshing than the breeze. So much pleasure is there in a delicious odor. And now there remains awaiting us the other part of our task, to make known the secret strength of the divine draught. But who could hope to understand this wonderful blessing, or to be able to pursue so great a miracle in verse? For really, when coffee has quietly glided into your body, taking itself within, it sheds a vital warmth through your limbs, and inspires joyous strength in your heart. Then if there is anything undigested, with fire's help, it heats the hidden channels and loosens the thin pores, through which the useless moisture exudes, and seeds of diseases flee from all your veins. Wherefore come, O you who have a care for your health, you who triple chin hangs on your breast, who drag your heavy stomach of great bulk, it is fitting for you, first of all, to indulge in the warm beverage, for indeed it will dry the hideous flow of moisture which oppresses your limbs, and sends forth streams of perspiration from your whole body. And in a short time the swelling of your fat belly will gradually begin to decrease, and it will lighten your members, now oppressed by their heavy weight. O happy peoples, on whom Titan, rising, looks with his first light! Here a rather free use of wine has never done harm. Law and religion forbid us to quaff the flowing wine. Here one lives on coffee. Here, then, flourishing with joyous strength, one pursues life and knows not what diseases are, nor that child of Bacchus and companion of high living, goat, nor what innumerable diseases through this union are ready to attack our world. Yet, indeed, the soothing power of this invigorating drink drives sad cares from the heart and exhilarates the spirits. I have seen a man, when he had not yet drained a mighty draught of this sweet nectar, walk silently with slow gait, his brow sad and forehead rough with forbidding wrinkles. This same man who had hardly bathed his throat with the sweet drink, no delay, clouds fled from his wrinkled brow, and he took pleasure in teasing all with his witty sayings. Nor yet did he pursue anyone with bitter laughter, for this harmless drink inspires no desire of offending, the venom is lacking, and pleasant laughter without bitterness pleases. And in the entire East this custom of coffee drinking has been accepted, and now, France, you adopt the foreign custom, so that public shops one after the other are open for drinking coffee. A hanging sign of either ivy or laurel invites the passers-by. Hither in crowds from the entire city they assemble, and while away the time in pleasant drinking. And when once the feelings have grown warm, acted upon by the gentle heat, then good-humored laughter and pleasant arguments increase. General gaiety ensues, the places about resound with joyous applause, but never does the liquid imbibed overpower weary minds, but rather, if ever slumber presses their heavy eyes and dulls the brain, and their strength, blunted, grows torpid in the body, coffee puts sleep to flight from the eyes, and slothful inactivity from the whole frame. Therefore to absorb the sweet draught would be an advantage, for those whom a great deal of long-continued labor awaits, and those who need to extend their study far into the night. And here I shall make known who taught the use of this pleasant drink, for its virtue, unknown, has lain hidden through many years, and reviewing, I shall relate the matter from the very beginning. An Arab shepherd was driving his young goats to the well-known pastures. They were wandering through lonely wastes and cropping the grasses, when a tree heavy with many berries, never seen before, met their eyes. At once, as they were able to reach the low branches, they began to pull off the leaves with many a nimble, and to pluck the tender growth. Its bitterness attracts. The shepherd, not knowing this, was meanwhile singing on the soft grass, and telling the story of his loves to the woods. But when the evening star rising warned him to leave the field, and he led back his well-fed flock to their stalls, he perceived that the beasts did not close their eyes in sweet sleep, but joyous beyond their wont, with wonderful delight throughout the whole night, jumped about with wanton leaps. Trembling with sudden fear, the shepherd stood amazed, and crazed by the sound, he thought these things were being done through some wicked trick of a neighbor, or by magic art. Not far from here, a holy band of brethren had built their humble home in a remote valley. Their lot it was to chant praises of God, and to load his altars with fitting gifts. Although throughout the night the deep-toned bell resounded with great din, and summoned them to the sacred temple, often the coming of dawn found them lingering on their couches, having forgotten to rise in the middle of the night. So great was their love of sleep. In charge of the sacred temple, revered and obeyed by his willing brethren, was the master, an aged man, a heavy mass of white hair on head and chin. The shepherd, hastening, came to him and told him the story, imploring his aid. The old man smiled to himself, but he agreed to go and investigate the hidden cause of the miracle. When he has come to the hills, he observes the lambs, together with their mothers, gnawing the berries of an unknown plant, and cries, "This is the cause of the trouble." And saying no more, he at once picks the smooth fruit from the heavily laden trees and carries it home, places it, when washed, in pure water, cooking it over the fire, and fearlessly drinks a large cup of it. Forthwith a warmth pervades his veins, a living force is diffused through his limbs, and weariness is dispelled from his aged body. Then, at length, the old man, exulting in the blessing thus found, rejoices and kindly shares with all his brothers. They eagerly at early nightfall indulge in pleasant banquets and drain great bowls. No longer is it hard for them to break off sweet sleep and to leave their soft beds as formerly. O fortunate ones, whose hearts the sweet draught has often bathed! No sluggish torpor holds their minds. They briskly rise for their prescribed duties and rejoice to outstrip the rays of the first light. You also, whose care it is to feed minds with divine eloquence, and to terrify with your words the souls of the guilty, you also should indulge in the pleasant drink, for, as you know, it strengthens weakness. Keen vigor is gained for the limbs from this source, and spreads through the whole body. From this source, too, shall come new strength and new power to your voice. You also, whom oft harmful vapors harass, whose sick brains the dangerous vertigo shakes. Oh, come! In this sweet liquid is a ready medicine, and none other better to calm undue agitation. Apollo planted this power for himself, they say. The story is worthy to be sung. Once a disease most deadly to life assailed the disciples of Apollo's mount. It spread far and wide, and attacked the brain itself. Already all the people of genius were suffering with this disease, and the arts, deserted, were languishing along with the workers. Some even pretended to have the disease, and assuming feigned suffering, gave themselves over to an idle life. Unpleasing work grew distasteful, and deadly inertia increased everywhere. It pleased all, now released from work and labors, to indulge in carefree quiet. Apollo, full of indignation, did not endure longer that the deadly contagion of such easy ruin should creep over them thus, and, that he might take away from seers all means of deception, he enticed from the rich bosom of the earth this friendly plant, than which no other is more ready either to refresh for work the mind wearied by long studies, or to soothe troublesome sorrows of the head. O plant, given to the human race by the gift of the gods! No other out of the entire list of plants has ever vied with you. On your account sailors sail from our shores, and fearlessly conquer the threatening winds, sandbanks, and dreadful rocks. With your nourishing growth you surpass Dittany, Ambrosia, and fragrant Panacea. Grim diseases flee from you. To you trusting health clings as a companion, and also the merry crowd, conversation, amusing jokes, and sweet whisperings. The poet Beligi, towards the close of the 16th century, composed a poem which, freely translated, runs: In Damascus, in Aleppo, in great Cairo, at every turn is to be found that mild fruit which gives so beloved a drink, before coming to court to triumph. There this serious disturber of the world has, by its unparalleled virtue, supplanted all wines from this blessed day. Jacques Delisle, 1738 to 1813, the didactic poet of nature, in Chant V of his Three Reigns of Nature, thus apostrophizes the divine nectar and describes its preparation. Divine coffee, translation from the French. A liquid there is to the poet most dear. Tea was lacking to Virgil, adored by Voltaire. Tea is thou divine coffee, for thine is the art, without turning the head yet to gladden the heart. And thus, though my palate be dulled by age, with joy I partake of thy dear beverage. How glad I prepare me thy nectar most precious! No soul shall usurp me a right so delicious. On the ambient flame when the black charcoal burns, the gold of thy bean to rare ebony turns. I alone, 'gainst the cone, wrote with fierce iron teeth, make thy fruitage cry out with its bittersweet breath. Till charmed with such perfume, with care I entrust to the pot on my hearth the rare spice-laden dust, first to calm, then excite, till it seethingly whirls. With an eye all attention I gaze till it boils. At last now the liquid comes slow to repose. In the hot smoking vessel its wealth I depose. My cup and thy nectar, from wild reeds expressed, America's honey my table has blessed. All is ready, Japan's gay enamel invites, and the tribute of two worlds thy prestige unites. Come, nectar divine, inspire thou me. I wish but Antigone, desert and thee, for scarce have I tasted thy odorous steam, when quick from thy clime soothing warmths round me stream. Attentive my thoughts rise and flow light as air, awaking my senses and soothing my care. Ideas that but late moved so dull and depressed, behold, they come smiling in rich garments dressed. Some genius awakes me, my course is begun, for I drink with each drop a bright ray of the sun. Momenet addressed to Galland the following verses: If slumber, friend, too near, with some late glass should creep, dull, poppy-perfumed sleep, if a too fumeous wine confounds at length thy brain, take coffee then, this juice divine shall banish sleep and steam of vaporous wine, and with its timely aid fresh vigor thou shalt find. Cassel, in his poem Les Plantes, the plants, could not omit the coffee trees of the tropics. He thus addressed them in 1811. Bright plants, the favorites of Phoebus, in these climes the rarest virtues offer. Delicious mocha, thy sap, enchantress, awakens genius, outvalues Parnassi. In a collection of the songs of Brittany in the Brest Library, there are many stanzas in praise of coffee. A Breton poet has composed a little piece of 96 verses in which he describes the powerful attraction that coffee has for women and the possible effects on domestic happiness. The first time that coffee was used in Brittany, says an old song of that country, only the nobility drank it, and now all the common people are using it, yet the greater part of them have not even bread. A French poet of the 18th century produced the following: Lines on Coffee, translation from the French. Good coffee is more than a savory cup. Its aroma has power to dry liquor up. By coffee you get upon leaving the table, a mind full of wisdom, thoughts lucid, nerves stable. And odd though it be, it's none the less true. Coffee's aid to digestion permits dining anew. And what's very true, though few people know it, fine coffee's the basis of every fine poet. For many a writer as windy as Boreas has been vastly improved by the drink ever glorious. Coffee brightens the dullness of heavy philosophy and opens the science of mighty geometry. Our lawmakers, too, when the nectar imbibing, plan wondrous reforms quite beyond the describing. The odor of coffee they delight in inhaling, and promise the country to alter laws ailing. From the brow of the scholar coffee chases the wrinkles, and mirth in his eyes like a firefly twinkles. And he, who before was but a hack of old Homer, becomes an original, and that's no misnomer. Observe the astronomer who's straining his eyes in watching the planets which soar through the skies. Alas, all those bright bodies seem hopelessly far, till coffee discloses his own guiding star. But greatest of wonders that coffee effects is to aid the news editor as he little expects. Coffee whispers the secrets of hidden diplomacy, hints rumors of wars and of scandals so racy. Inspiration by coffee must be nigh unto magic, for it conjures up facts that are certainly tragic. And for a few pennies, coffee's small price per cup, ye editors be able to swallow the universe up. Esmerand celebrated Captain de Clio's romantic voyage to Martine with the coffee plants from the Jardin des Plantes in some admirable verses quoted in chapter 2. Among other notable poetic flights in praise of coffee produced in France, mention should be made of L'Éloge de Coffee, Eulogy of Coffee, a song in 24 couplets, Paris, Jacques Estienne, 1711. Le Café, Coffee, a fragment from the fourth chant, song, of La grandeur de Dieu dans les merveilles de la nature, the grandeur of God in the wonders of nature, Marcier. Le Café, extract from the fourth gastronomic song by Berquois, A mon café, to my coffee, stanzas written by Ducis. Le Café, anonymous stanzas inserted in the Macedonian Poetic, 1824. A poem in Latin in the Abbé Olivier's collections, Le Bouquet Blanc et le Bouquet Noir, Poésie en quatre chants. Le Café, C.D. Mary, 1837. Éloge du Café, S. Melai, 1852. Many Italian poets have sung the praises of coffee. El Barodi wrote his poem, Il Café, in 1681. Giuseppe Parini, 1729 to 1799, Italy's great satirical and lyric poet and critic of the 18th century, in Il Giorno, the Day, gives a delightful pen picture of the manners and customs of Milan's polite society of the period. William Dean Howells quotes as follows from these poems, his own translation, in his Modern Italian Poets. The feast is over, and the lady signals to the cavalier that it is time to leave the table. Spring to thy feet, the first of all, and, drawing near thy lady, remove her chair and offer her thy hand, and lead her to the other room, nor suffer longer, that the stale reek of viands shall offend her delicate sense. Thee with the rest invites the grateful odor of the coffee, where it smokes upon a smaller table hid and graced with Indian webs. The redolent gums that meanwhile burn, sweeten and purify the heavy atmosphere, and banish thence all lingering traces of the feast. Ye sick and poor, whom misery or whom hope, perchance, has guided in the noonday to these doors, tumultuous, naked, and unsightly throng, with mutilated limbs and squalid faces. In litters and on crutches from afar, comfort yourselves, and with expanded nostrils drink in the nectar of the feast divine that favorable zephyrs waft to you. But do not dare besiege these noble precincts, importunately offering her that reigns within your loathsome spectacle of woe. And now, sir, it is your office to prepare the tiny cup that then shall minister slow sipped its liquor to the lady's lips, and now bethink thee whether she prefer the boiling beverage much or little tempered with sweet, or if, perchance, she likes it best, as doth the barbarous spouse, then when she sits upon brocades of Persia, with light fingers the beard visage of her lord caressing. This is from Il Mezzogiorno, noon. The other three poems, rounding out the day, are Il Mattino, morning, Il Vespre, evening, and La Notte, night. In Il Mattino, Parini sings, should dreary hypochondria's woes oppress thee, should round thy charming limbs in too great measure, thy flesh increase, then with thy lips do honor to that clear beverage made from the well-bronzed. The smoking, ardent beans Aleppo sends thee, and distant Mocha too, 1,000 shiploads, when slowly sipped it knows no rival. Belli's Il Caffè supplies a partial bibliography of the Italian literature on coffee. There are many poems, some of them put to music. As late as 1921, there were published in Bologna some advertising verses on coffee by G.B. Zecchini, with music by Cesare Cantino. Pope Leo XIII, in his Horatian poem on frugality, composed in his 88th year, thus verses his appreciation of coffee. Last comes the beverage of the Orient shore, Mocha, far off, the fragrant berries bore. Taste the dark fluid with a dainty lip, digestion waits on pleasure as you sip. Peter Altenberg, a Vienna poet, thus celebrated the cafes of his native city. To the coffee house. When you are worried, have trouble of one sort or another, to the coffee house. When she did not keep her appointment for one reason or other, to the coffee house. When your shoes are torn and dilapidated, coffee house. When your income is 400 crowns and you spend 500, coffee house. You are a chair warmer in some office, while your ambition led you to seek professional honors, coffee house. You could not find a mate to suit you, coffee house. You feel like committing suicide, coffee house. You hate and despise human beings, and at the same time you cannot be happy without them, coffee house. You compose a poem which you cannot inflict upon friends you meet in the street, coffee house. When your coal scuttle is empty and your gas ration exhausted, coffee house. When you need money for cigarettes, you touch the head waiter in the coffee house. When you are locked out and haven't the money to pay for unlocking the house door, coffee house. When you acquire a new flame and intend provoking the old one, you take the new one to the old ones, coffee house. When you feel like hiding, you dive into a coffee house. When you want to be seen in a new suit, coffee house. When you cannot get anything on trust anywhere else, coffee house. End of section 52.